One. And we're live. Welcome to Champions Park Lake Studio for our weekly edition, our Thursday night edition. This is our series, Unmasking 2021 in Boat Racing. So excited to have everybody join in. Feel free to chime in with comments, questions for our guests, or even myself. First off, let's thank our sponsor tonight. Hydro Shot has come back on as our sponsor. Feel free to go to h2bev.com and you can order a case of this and put in promo code Dana and you'll get 10% off your Hydro Shot. It's hydro infused water and I just love it. It's pure energy. Good energy. So without further ado, I'm so excited to have this guest on because he's like my great whale. We've been trying to get him on forever, and it's been technology, his end, my end, everything. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the former Mercury Racing Director, former APBA President, and current Senior VP of UIM, Fred Hauenstein. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to finally have you on. We had some problems, technical difficulty and everything. We're glad to have you on.
Yeah.
Hopefully people chime in, let us know you're here so we can see some comments, make sure we're live, and everybody can tune in. So we're unmasking 2021. We've had over 40 guests on our show, and I like to start every show out with how everybody got started in boat racing. You've been around it a long time, and kind of give us how you got involved in powerboat racing.
Well, basically, because my father was doing it. I've got to show a picture if I may.
Excellent.
Does that show?
Yes, that shows, right? Clear.
That's my dad and a trophy he won. And it's a few years ago. I was, I think, 5 years old at the time.
Yeah.
So, anyway, just followed in my dad's footsteps and basically been doing it ever since.
So what that trophy that he won, what class was that in?
It's Sea Racing Hydro.
Sea Racing Hydro.
In fact, it's the same equipment that the antique guys are still running today in a thing. In the pro category, they call it Sea Racing Hydro.
Nice.
The boats are somewhat more modern, and the guys keep putting together the same old engines that my dad was running back then. So.
Excellent. It looks like we're having some folks chime in. Feel free to ask questions. We'll pop them up for Fred and ourselves to get answers. Now, currently, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the Senior VP of UIM. How long have you been involved in the UIM side?
Oh, since about 1978, I think that I started going to UIM meetings, and then I got elected to the technical commission about 1979 or 80, and I've been involved in the various commissions and stuff since then.
So you either volunteered a lot or drew the short straw. Was that it?
A little bit of both, yeah. I've enjoyed it. I enjoy working with rule changes, and it's interesting when you're dealing with people where English isn't their first language and trying to write a rule and interpreting what they're really trying to tell you. that becomes a real challenge. But it's actually kind of fun.
Excellent.
I enjoy doing it.
So you were the former engineer or former Mercury Racing Director. How many years were you at Mercury Racing?
I started in 1978 with that Mercury, and I retired in 2008. So
nice.
30 years. When I started, I was the chief engineer for the factory team, and of course that died in early 1980. So from there on, it was kind of engineering customer products and doing some special racing events like kilo records
Mhm.
and the 24 hours of Rouen in particular, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Now you've done a ton of projects with Mercury. What was your favorite engineering project ever at Mercury Racing?
Um,
That's like saying which kid you like more than the other.
exactly. Yeah. I particularly enjoyed. Well, I don't know. There's two or three of them that stand out, and developing the T4, which was the 3.4 liter production engine, developing that into a racing engine.
Mm,
Uh, didn't last very long, but we raced it in 1979 and 1980. I think the first race it entered was Bristol in 1979,
mhm.
and the last race it ran was Bristol in 1980.
Oh
So,
wow.
and we won the world championship with it in Milan in 1979, and ran a few other races
Mhm.
with varying success. But it was an interesting project. One of the
We get
interesting things that we did do early on, we were running the fuel injected 2.4 liter Mercury's at the time, and we were selling a carbureted version of the 2.4 to customers. The factory team only had the fuel injected engine, and
wow.
we were running a little over $8,000 with the factory team engines, and we weren't running quite that high with the carbureted engines that the customers had, and we were breaking rods.
Hmm.
And to cut the story a little bit short, I solved the rod breaking problem by shortening the carburetors up, if that
Hmm.
makes much sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were going into a resonance in the tuning of the length of the carburetor, and it would cause the cylinders to go out basically, so they didn't have any compression to catch the piston at top dead center, and it would break the rods. So we shortened the carburetors up, got rid of that uh, pulse detuning, and
Mhm.
the engines lived after that. So
Nice. Nice. We got a question here from Val Collins. How
uh,
much fun did you have winning the Parker 9-hour enduro?
yeah, that was a kick. That was a kick. Um,
Now,
it's a
who
long
did you win
story.
that? Who did you win that with?
Ron Hill.
That's what I thought. Ron was on our show prior, and I think he brought that up.
Yeah, probably did. Yep. Yeah, it was really interesting because I was the Johnson team driver that year, and Jimbo and I were going to race the Parker 9 hour as a team,
Mhm.
and he started the race, and the engine failed on the first lap. So I was suddenly a free agent, and Ron Hill didn't have a co-driver. So we joined. I had actually signed up ahead of time because Ron and I knew that he didn't have a co-driver, and that's how it worked out. We ran the rest of the day co-driving with Ron.
Awesome.
It was,
Now, speaking of enduros, you've been pretty prominent in the 24 hours of Rouen. You did several. Was it two projects you did, or you did the Opti, and you won twice with that, correct?
yes, yes. Uh, we the the initial introduction of the Optimax product was at Rouen one year, and
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the year. We had a couple of boats and entered the production version, the full 20-inch shiftable gear case version,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, we, in quotes, won our class, which was kind of us, but we finished and finished the 24 hours running quite well. So that was kind of neat. And then we got into basically the S2 class with the Opti that is the SST 200 engine,
Mhm.
and we entered three boats, and we finished first, second, and fourth that year, and against even the S3000 Mercuries, the 2.5s. Um, that was that's one of the things I'm quite happy with. Um, and we won the other year with the Optis as well.
What
Be-
was what was some of the biggest challenges you had preparing for that race? Because it's not like Mercury hadn't raced there before. This was a new motor, a whole new kind of configuration, correct?
Yep. Well, mainly because it has a oil pump system on the engine. When we did the pre-testing at Lake X, we were good for about 6 hours, and suddenly we'd run out of oil and fail an engine, or at least if the driver understood, he could stop when you got the buzzer going off. It couldn't hear it, so we usually trashed an engine. And we finally figured out how to pump the oil into the system with a little electric pump in the boats. So we had a
Huh.
continuous supply of oil going up to the engine and back into the oil tank.
Hmm.
So we got
Yeah,
the problem.
excellent.
The other problem we had was when we set out to win the overall a few years before that with the 2.5s, and we went to Lake X. We we had problems um, twisting the top off the drive shaft for the gear case, and
Hmm.
uh, we 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 failed one. We thought, well, it's a fluke. We failed the second one. We knew there was something wrong, and we went through a resonance analysis, and it turned out that somewhere between 83 and 8700 or so, um, that there was a resonance that would in 6 hours just twist the top off the gear case of the drive shaft.
Mhm.
And so we went to Rouen with a absolute order that the drivers were not to run over 8,000 RPM. Period. You know,
Uh-huh.
if they went to 8,600, we could tell them they were going to last an hour or two. So we had one driver on our team that was out there, and he was going a little bit faster, and he was passing all other guys on our team. And one of our guys came in and said, "Hey, I'm running, like you said, I'm running 8,000. He has the same prop, the same setup I've got, and he's just going by me. So I know he's going at higher RPM." And I said, "Just, just stay the course." And sure enough, within the next hour, that one failed. So everybody else after that stuck with the 8,000. They wouldn't break that. So I thought, thank goodness. They got one guy to show them make believers out of them.
Hey, you never know. The Ford versus Ferrari movie came out. Maybe Fred Hauenstein might have a movie about his projects at the 24 hours. Good
Uh,
stuff. We got some questions here, Fred, coming in. Some
uh-oh.
guests coming on. We got Hydro Racer. Hey, Fred, any thoughts on the new Mercury Racing 360 APX V8 competition outboard design for UIM Formula One? I'm impressed he got the acronym, all the numbers, everything in there, because
Yeah,
he didn't say four cycle, but
yeah.
it's the V8 new four cycle.
You got the name.
Basically, he's asking your thoughts, and we talked about a little bit about that off camera. So
Yeah, I think it'll be a good thing. One of the things that the Formula One series has continuously worried Mercury about, questioned Mercury over the years, and has kind of pushed was the need to be clean, um,
Hmm.
and obviously two strokes have a bad reputation, and this really feeds into their um, desires and their need when they're selling races to various sites that we have a clean engine,
Hmm.
and it'll be very competitive. Um, one of the interest One of the most interesting parts of that is the fact that they're going to seal the engines, and and they'll be run as built, which should reduce the cost to these teams a tremendous amount. I mean, they're changing cranks every race, they're pistons, rods, all sorts of things that they can run one race and then go through everything. With this engine, they should be able to run a year, a season, hopefully,
Hmm.
and that'll the engine may cost a little bit more at the beginning, but I think at the end of the season they will have actually spent less money on the engine, which I think is good for more teams. The top
Well,
teams support it, not every team.
I think it's good for boat racing overall because usually, typically, a Mercury will start at that high level, but hopefully it carries down to the stock outboard classes, and we start embracing a four-cycle technology because all of the marine industry is pretty much embraced it.
Yep, yep, yep. It would be nice to reflect what the fisherman is buying.
Exactly. I know I get that question all the time, environmental side.
Yep.
On the two cycles. And we actually had a sponsor at our lake this past year, Renewable Lubricants, that developed a biodegradable oil two cycle
Mm-hmm.
for motors. So it's pretty interesting, soybean based. It was really interesting, the product that they brought, and we've been testing it. So it's something we have to be cognizant about in
Yep.
boat racing.
Yep.
So we got more questions coming in.
Uh
Fred, you're a popular guy tonight.
oh.
You don't have that Facebook account, so they're like, "Hey, Fred's on Facebook. Let's wear him out." So we got one from Marley Hill.
Ah.
I want to hear a Fred Hauenstein story about his deck riding in F runabout. I'm trying to share the photo I have, but I can't hear, I guess. So something about a story about a deck riding in an F runabout.
The old time, well, now it's called 1100cc runabout in the pro category. And in the old days, the weight in that class, it was a 60 cubic inch four cylinder Evinrude
Mhm.
460 engine. And the next biggest class was a 30 cubic inch of C racing stuff like my dad raced. In F, the total weight in the boat was a couple of 100 pounds heavier than the C. So they just put a second person in the boat, or they designed it that way. And the two people in the boat were side by side in a wider cockpit. And the old boats, in order to make them turn properly, they had to move their weight forward. And with the F, because it worked that way, the deck rider was actually got up and laid out on the deck to move the weight that forward. And I was dumb enough to do that some for a couple of seasons. But oops, sorry.
Well, if you've been in boat racing this long, there's probably not some wise decisions that you've made along the way. Any boat racer can say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've heard plenty of good rental car stories, and boat racers have never been kind to rental cars.
Yeah. Yeah. Boat racers and rental cars didn't get along very well.
Exactly. So I have a question. So how did this Arcadian Unlimited project come about? What was that crazy idea that came
Well,
about?
a lot of people have tried to do unique things, outboards and stuff in the unlimited category. And most of the time, they tried to approach it with something different. So when Jim decided that we wanted to go race unlimited, we said, you know, you can't run a tunnel boat on a hydroplane race course.
Mhm.
Um, we really need to do it with a hydroplane, and it has to be pretty much classic hydroplane design, which we did. Jim was racing inboard hydros with a guy named Marcel Belleville building the boats, and so Marcel built an unlimited hydro, and we put 8, at the time they were 2.4 liter V6 powerheads in it, and they all drove a common drive shaft, prop shaft, and it actually was pretty fast. Um,
Mhm.
One of the problems that we didn't realize was that it was just at the start of the turbine engine stuff, and the turbines uh, were rated at 27 something, 27 horsepower, and we had 8 305 horsepower 2.4s, so we thought, you know, we wouldn't be very far off with a little lighter boat and a nice broad power band.
Mhm.
The thing that we didn't realize is that what the guys with the turbines were doing, they were throwing a whole lot more fuel into the engine, and the fuel system on that particular turbine engine was good for 6,000 horsepower. So um,
Mhm.
uh, way on into the future, after, you know, long after we were out of it, um, they finally realized that they had to limit the fuel delivery to those engines, and have turbine engines finishing races rather than breaking down halfway. What was happening is a couple of hot dogs would get to racing each other, and until one of them blew up, and then the other guy wins. So that wasn't much of a sport.
Yeah.
And I think if we had um, done what we did in today's world, we probably would have been more competitive. But the turbines at that time were pulling way too much horsepower for our effort.
Interesting.
When they
Interesting.
when they put the fuel emitters in, it actually got back to where one of the Allison powered in limited won a race. So
Interesting. Excellent. So yeah, you've had some good projects there, and
yeah.
I've seen good pictures of that in the Bill Chatfield barn. So along with another project that's sitting in his barn that I wanted to ask about, the Wizard,
Yeah.
the two-headed monster.
Yep.
Where did that come about? Because that was during the V8 days, correct?
Yep. Well, um, it it's a much longer story than is suitable here, but really,
Oh, it's suitable here. We got plenty of internet time.
oh, okay. Um, we wanted to race Formula One,
Mhm.
and the V8s. You couldn't beat them with just the regular Mercury that you could buy as a racer, the two liter or the 2.4 liter at the
Mhm.
time. So we were thinking about it. How are we going to do this? And it was limited to a single engine boat. You couldn't run multiple engines. So
Mhm.
in order to compete, and we decided to do this with two power heads on a single gear case. Um, at the same time, Mercury was trying to get into the series, and of course, um, Jim's team wasn't part of the Mercury team to get into that with the T 2.4, or I mean the T4, pardon me.
Mhm.
So Jim said, "Well, we need to do something on our own." And about that time, I had a um, there was an engineering vice president at Mercury that didn't understand, I guess. And rather than stick around and possibly get fired, I quit at Mercury.
Really?
So I was on my own doing. I did an eight engine offshore boat for the Popeyes team.
Mm.
8 2.4 power heads. No, 8 2-liter power heads because it was a 16-liter limit on the class, and
Mm-hmm.
it did break the record finally.
Mm-hmm.
It won its first race. It was a nice smooth water race in the Bahamas, so it qualified. Anyway, so we took basically that sort of technology and made an outboard. Set two power heads side by side and ran belts to a single drive shaft that drove the gear case. And it took us a while to get dialed in with the belts. They were that's a good story too. Bill enjoy that too. We talked to some belt people that had been running belts with dragsters and snowmobiles and that sort of thing. And the one guy that we really listened to quite a bit was a drag bike uh, powered by a 300 horsepower Norton.
Hmm.
And he said, "Oh, I've got these belts. They're 2.4 inches wide, et cetera, and they'll run me 2 years." And so we thought, well, we're a little less than 300 horsepower. That's probably where we ought to go.
Mm-hmm.
We started running the Wizard when we finally got it all put together, and our belts were good for about 10 minutes. We could blow a belt, we could replace that belt, and then within a minute or two, the other belt would fail. So we knew that we were good for 10 minutes with the belts. So then we sat down and we thought, drag racing. How long does it take to put in 10 minutes in drag racing? So we figured if the guy ran 2 years, he probably never got to 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
So we had to redesign the whole thing. So in Bill's shop, there's actually two of those. One of them with the 2.4-inch belts and one with the 3-inch wide belts. And those made it. That we could run the time we needed to with a 3-inch wide belt.
Mm-hmm.
So
How, to my understanding, that motor was so powerful, it was tough to find a boat that could hold it. Correct?
no, that was it's not really a mistake, but it was probably an error we made. We did a whole lot of testing and development work with the engine on an old Hodges boat that had been run as a V8 in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And geez, we ran forever on that boat, testing it. And then when they started to settle, well, actually, we got into one race in London where they didn't follow OMC's demand that they not let us run.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jim bought a brand new Burgess boat, and in testing, we lost the transom in that boat. so then Mercury gave us a Seabold, and we ran it at Cincinnati, the last race of the season, where in order to settle all the lawsuits, OMC and Mercury, OMC had seen the T4s run at London and decided that wasn't a threat. So they decided they could let the Mercuries run at Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, but not the Wizard, our twin power head thing. And Mercury, God bless him, said, nope, you got to let the Wizard run or it's no deal. So in the end, OMC said, okay. So Johnny Sanders was driving the Wizard. He won the first preliminary heat.
Mm-hmm.
He was leading the second heat when the transom came out of that boat. And so that was that. It was fun. I mean, it was fast. We enjoyed doing it, and then we thought, well, let's do the unlimited. If we can't do that.
Nice. Yeah, I keep harassing Bill. He's got to finish that, and we got to stick it on a boat and stick it in a museum somewhere.
Yep.
So we got some questions chiming in. K-Dub, always with questions. She's like, "Hello, Papa Fred. You and your son Mike and son Dan have many victories under your belt. Could you tell us a family victory that stands out?"
Well, a couple of years ago, Mikey finally won A Stock Hydro after trying for 25 years. That one stands out. um, um, Putting Danny in the D Stock Hydro in I think '95, um, and he won that after ending up upside down in the second preliminary heat, but he'd won the first preliminary heat, so he did still qualify for the final, and then he won the final. So that was a big one. Uh,
Nice.
my favorite one was winning the John Ward Trophy race in Depew in 1968. Sorry, that's a long time ago.
No, it must have meant something special. I remembered it.
Yeah, we uh, the the boat failed, so to speak, right in the last lap of the first heat, and they were running back-to-back heats, and Marcel was under the boat between heats, putting a nail every well, they were almost head to head down the bottom of the boat, nailing the bottom back on so we could run the second heat, but he couldn't put the transom piece back in. There's a piece about so big that uh, so they carried the boat out. There were about four or five guys on each side, and when I fired it up, they wouldn't let me go until I made sure it was running. And then they launched the boat, and I made one of the better starts of my life. Got out front in the first turn and then won the second heat. And I told my wife to go tell somebody that if I broke down, they had to get to me right away because otherwise the boat would go down.
Mm-hmm.
And so she went to the announcer and tried, because he had the connection to the judges stand, and she's trying to explain to him that the boat has a problem and it's going to sink if it stops. And the guy says, "Well, which boat is it?" And she said, "Well, it's that one in the lead." Of course, he laughed her off the stand. Anyway, it was kind of fun.
Awesome. Excellent. All right, viewers, feel free to chime in with questions. I see them popping up. K-Dub's throwing her questions out, and all those viewers that have that drinking game knows when K-Dub asks a question, we drink up. I have a question for you. I mean, you worked so many years at Mercury, and you were there during the OMC, Mercury battles. Then you were there after OMC kind of really got out of boat racing. What was there a big difference in atmosphere from when you had competition at Mercury and when you didn't really have competition?
Well, yeah, obviously there was, but
Mm-hmm.
what was really strange is that we were when the factory teams died, we were racing the T4, and of course our budgets got pulled,
Yeah.
and so OMC was still feeding out that 3-liter V6 that they had to various teams. We didn't have enough parts to feed any of our T4s out to anybody, so we were still trying to help some of the drivers that had been factory or not even the factory guys, help them compete. But it was kind of difficult during that time. There was still quite a racing attitude at Mercury. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Everybody still wanted to win races, but it was pretty tough to do with the limited resources. Really, I mean, we had not been racing the T4 long enough to have built up a stack of parts, so to speak, so we could continue feeding them out like OMC could with that 3-liter which was actually a pretty good engine.
Mhm.
My version of it. That was one of those things that I kind of regretted leaving OMC at the time that I did, because we had just gone into a major change on that 3 liter, and I left before one got to run on the dyno, and
Mhm.
turns out it was pretty good. Anyway, then I had to compete against it.
I got another question from K-Dub. Tell
Oh.
us the meaning and story behind the orange. And to all the viewers out there, the Arcadian orange, everybody knows it. And if anybody knows the history of Champions Park Lake, we had to have the Arcadian orange on that lake due to history, what you guys did there, you and Bill Chatfield and even your brother, all the testing that you guys did at Champions Park Lake. We had to have an orange boat out there, and I made it a point that we did it, and we honored everybody on, but we did miss that. We forgot, and it wasn't Bill's fault because we didn't let him know. We forgot that Fred drove the orange Arcadian too. So, and we didn't put the name on it, but we got everybody's autograph and it had a lot of fun with it. It was good to see the Arcadian orange out there. So give us a little background on that Arcadian orange.
Yeah, I think I did sign the side of that boat. That
You did or didn't?
I did. Yeah,
Good.
I was there that weekend.
Yeah, you were there.
Yeah. Well, the orange. I, my dad started painting his boats orange when he'd quit for a couple of years in the early 50s, and he started back in 1956. And I think before he quit, he'd had an orange boat or something. And my mother claimed that it came from a tablecloth that she really liked the color in it. And she said, "You ought to paint your boats this color." So, but my dad's boats were orange, and so mine and Jim's and all of our boats have been orange ever since. So,
Yeah. It's
just
everybody knows that Arcadian orange.
Yep, family color.
Yeah. We got some other questions here. Jim Reiner.
Oh.
What's your secret to your fast 750 hydro?
Oh,
and for all the viewers out there, Fred still races. Fred, you raced a couple years ago in Springfield, Ohio, at Champions Park Lake.
Yep. 750 hydro, as a matter of fact.
Exactly. Did you win that class that time when you came out? No.
I think
I blame it on Bill Chatfield as your handler or crew chief there.
Yep. He was my crew. I think I won the D stock hydro race there. But
yeah.
I did so well. And the D stock was just a race I wanted to, as a fill-in. The D mod or the 750 hydro that Jim was talking about there was the one I went there to run. And, well, I guess I got beat. I broke a shear pin in one heat and welded a prop on the prop shaft, and typical weekend. But anyway, I don't know what makes my 750 go so fast. I just keep trying to build better engines and buy better propellers, I guess, is the bottom line.
Spoken like a fast boat racer, you don't want to tell all your secrets. You got to keep them guessing. You got to keep them guessing.
Yeah.
So I had a question. Being that you've been on all these, you've been with APBA, UIM, you've been a lot of proponent of safety and everything. You were one of the first ones to push the OPC capsule, correct? And were you and Chatfield involved in winning the first capsule race in Augusta?
I don't recall.
He claims Jonathan Jones won that race.
Yep. I think the capsules were really taking hold in Europe, and we were making them pretty much mandatory in the U.S. as well. Um, the the biggest problem with that was the reluctance of people to convert, and modify the boats enough to put capsules in them or build new boats with safety cockpits, and
Mm-hmm.
that was a real uphill battle. Um, we we got it done, um,
Mm-hmm.
but it was there was a lot of hard feelings during those years from some people, and I know
Mm-hmm.
they. Um, if I remember, we passed a rule here in the U.S. and the Europeans were still saying it was recommended or advisable or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to Parker one year and they tried to run a UIM class at Parker so they wouldn't have to run capsules in the top class. And APVA, thank goodness, said no. You have to follow our safety rules if you're going to run. And I think, well, anybody that ran a boat without a cockpit today would be really stupid, I think. But that's
Yeah.
we the
It had.
biggest fear, obviously, the thing they could point to is, well, what if we get trapped in the cockpit and we'll drown? And I thought, well, the answer to that is getting thrown into the water and killed outright is much less preferable to taking a chance on possibly drowning
Mhm.
while you're completely conscious and can get yourself out of the boat. So we sold the deal in the end. I think everybody's thankful we did.
Yeah. We got another question coming in from Jim Robb, one of our racers. He misspelled Fred, but Fred, tell us about the Kilo boat with the OMC Mod 50. Who built it?
Oh, oh, that was one of my my pro category hydros that Marcel Belleville built. It was this a boat I'd been racing in C and D Alki, 500
Mm-hmm.
and 700, and it it fit. So we bolted the 70, well, the OE engine on it. That's another good story. If you got a minute.
Oh yes, we got plenty. Love stories. We got to. I
So,
love documenting these stories.
so I set the record with it.
Mm-hmm.
At 107 it was, and Edgar Rose was the inspector. So we haul it over to Edgar, and Edgar um, has us, pulls spark plugs out and checks this and that and the other, and he checks the bore on one cylinder. And this engine had been used for quite a bit. It was a dyno um, mule and had been rebuilt a few times. So he checks this one cylinder and he checks the one stroke and he multiplies by 3 and he said, this engine's illegal. It's over 850. And, Charlie's there and Edgar's sweating a little bit. And of course, we're really upset. And so we thought, well, it can't be. So we have him measure all 3 bores and measure all 3 strokes and then add it together and we made it. And so he says, okay, you're free to go. And I said, Edgar, you didn't measure the length of this boat because it had to be a minimum of 13 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets out his tape measure and he measures the boat and it's 12:11. It's not 13 feet. And he's just about to have a heart attack. And I said, Edgar, there's a 2-inch tolerance in the OPC rule on that. So it's legal because we'd gone all through that. I had a faster boat that I couldn't make long enough to run for that kilo record. So we knew the boat was legal. So he turns to me and he says, get this blankety blank boat out of here. So the next week, we all get a memo saying, if you're ever going to do this again, we will pre-inspect before we go to the event.
I'm
Anyway,
sure that I'm sure the tech inspectors loved inspecting you.
Well, not bad.
Like I said, folks, feel free to chime in, ask any questions, or throw comments out there where you're coming in from. We got quite a few viewers tonight, Fred.
Oh,
A
really?
question I have for all my guests, because you've raced against a ton of people. What would be your dream race of past or present drivers? And you only get 5. And it could be for various reasons. It could be a style